I thought the worst thing that could happen was failing my nursing certification exam. I was wrong. The worst thing was standing in front of 300 people at the Westmont Medical Center awards ceremony, about to receive the Outstanding Graduate award, when my mom's boyfriend Adrian Vosler stood up and bellowed, "Your daughter's a mistake. She doesn't belong here." The entire auditorium fell silent. Cameras stopped flashing. My hands trembled as I held the award I'd worked 4 years to earn. But that humiliation was nothing compared to what I discovered later. Adrian had been sabotaging my career behind the scenes, stealing money meant for my medical supplies, and trying to convince the nursing board I was unstable. He thought one public outburst would destroy me. He didn't know I was about to expose him on live television in front of the entire state. By the end, he'd be the one labeled as the mistake, and I'd prove my worth in ways he never imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Westmont Medical Center's grand ballroom sparkled with celebration. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over round tables draped in elegant navy cloth, while the soft hum of conversation mixed with the gentle clink of champagne glasses. Tonight was the annual Excellence in Healthcare Awards ceremony, honoring the region's top medical graduates and professionals. I smoothed my black dress and checked my reflection in the polished surface of my phone screen. After 4 grueling years of nursing school, countless clinical rotations, and more sleepless nights than I cared to count, I was finally here. Celine Caraway, Outstanding Graduate Award recipient. The words still felt surreal rolling around in my mind. Around me, families clustered together, beaming with pride as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Mothers adjusted their sons' bow ties, fathers practiced taking photos with their phones, and siblings whispered excitedly about their accomplished relatives. The energy was infectious, pure joy mixed with hard-earned achievement. I scanned the crowd for my own family, my heart doing that familiar flutter of anticipation mixed with anxiety. There, near the back corner, I spotted them. Mom sat rigidly in her chair, her burgundy dress conservative and understated, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her smile was present but strained, the kind of expression she wore when she was trying to keep peace. Beside her lounged Adrian Vosler, my mother's boyfriend of 3 years. His posture was casual to the point of disrespect, one arm draped over the back of his chair, the other holding his phone as he scrolled through something that apparently held more interest than his girlfriend's daughter's achievement. He wore a rumpled suit that looked like it had been pulled from the back of a closet, his tie crooked and his expression bored. I had hoped things might be different tonight. This was my moment after all, the culmination of everything I had worked for since I was 16 and decided I wanted to heal people, to make a difference in the world. Surely Adrian could put aside whatever issues he had with me for one evening and just be supportive. The past 3 years had been a careful dance around his moods and opinions. When Mom first introduced him, I tried to be welcoming. He was a construction foreman, practical and straightforward, and I thought maybe he could bring some stability to Mom's life after Dad had walked out on us when I was 15. But Adrian never seemed to warm to me. Every conversation felt like a test I was failing. Every achievement I shared was met with skepticism or outright dismissal. "Nursing school is just babysitting with extra steps," he had said when I first enrolled. "Real medicine is done by doctors. You're just playing dress-up in scrubs." The comments stung, but Mom always made excuses. "He doesn't mean it that way. Celine, he just comes from a different world. Give him time." I gave him time. 3 years of it, but instead of growing closer, the gulf between us had only widened. The ceremony began with opening remarks from Dr. Harrison Blackwell, Westmont Medical Center's chief of staff. His voice carried easily through the sound system as he spoke about the dedication and sacrifice required to excel in healthcare. I felt my nerves settling as he talked about the graduates who had gone above and beyond, who had shown not just academic excellence, but genuine compassion for their patients. Category after category was called: clinical excellence, research innovation, community service. Each time I applauded genuinely for my classmates, feeling that warm glow of shared accomplishment. We had all fought through the same rigorous program, supported each other through the hardest moments, and now we were celebrating together. And now, Dr. Blackwell announced, his voice taking on a more formal tone, we come to our highest honor for nursing graduates. The Outstanding Graduate Award recognizes not only academic achievement, but leadership, clinical skill, and the embodiment of our profession's core values of compassion and excellence. My heart began to race. This was it. 4 years of 90-hour weeks, of studying until my eyes burned, of clinical rotations that tested every limit I thought I had. 4 years of patient care that had taught me more about human nature than any textbook ever could. This year's recipient graduated summa cum laude, while maintaining a perfect clinical evaluation record. She has been accepted to our hospital's intensive care unit residency program and has already been recognized by the State Nursing Board for her innovative approach to patient advocacy. The words seemed to float toward me through a haze of anticipation and disbelief. Around the room, heads were beginning to turn, people starting to realize the announcement was building toward something significant. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating this year's Outstanding Graduate Award recipient, Celine Caraway. The applause erupted immediately, a wave of sound that washed over me as I stood on shaking legs. The spotlight found me, warm and bright, and I could see people at nearby tables rising to their feet. My clinical supervisor, Mrs. Elena Draycott, was beaming from 3 tables over, clapping enthusiastically. Classmates I had studied with through countless all-nighters were whistling and cheering. I made my way toward the stage, my heels clicking, against the polished floor, trying to absorb every second of this moment. This was what I had dreamed of since my first day of nursing school. This was validation that all the sacrifices, all the moments when I doubted myself, had been worth it. Dr. Blackwell met me at the podium steps, his handshake firm and his smile genuine. Congratulations, Celine. Your professors speak of you with tremendous respect. You represent the very best of what our profession can be. I accepted the Crystal Award, heavy and beautifully crafted, catching the light from every angle. The applause continued, and I turned toward the microphone to give my prepared remarks. My eyes automatically sought out Mom and Adrian in the audience, hoping to see pride, hoping to see support. That's when my world exploded. Adrian Vosler rose from his chair like a thundercloud, his face flushed red, his voice booming across the suddenly silent ballroom. Your daughter's a mistake. She doesn't belong here. The words hit me like a physical blow. The applause died instantly, replaced by a horrified silence that seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room. 300 people turned their heads, in perfect unison, like a choreographed movement, to stare at the man screaming at a healthcare awards ceremony. You people don't know her like I do, Adrian continued, his voice carrying clearly through the microphone-enhanced acoustics. She's not cut out for this. She's going to get people killed. My legs nearly gave out beneath me. The Crystal Award slipped in my suddenly sweaty palms, and I had to grip it tighter to keep from dropping it. Dr. Blackwell's face went pale, then flushed with anger, but he remained professionally composed beside me. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Then the whispers began, slithering through the crowd like smoke. Did he just say she's a mistake? That's her family? How embarrassing. What kind of person does that at an awards ceremony? I forced myself to look at Mom. She had gone completely white, her hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. But she wasn't standing up. She wasn't defending me. She was pulling on Adrian's arm, trying to get him to sit down, her lips moving in frantic whispers that looked like, please stop, and not here. The photographer who had been positioned to capture my acceptance was now snapping pictures of the commotion. I could see phones coming out throughout the audience, people discreetly recording what was quickly becoming a viral moment. The bright lights that had felt so celebratory moments before now felt harsh and exposing. I stood frozen at the podium, holding my award, as Adrian finally allowed Mom to pull him back into his seat. The silence that followed was somehow worse than his. Shouting. It was the silence of judgment, of pity, of second-hand embarrassment for the young woman whose family had just humiliated her at her moment of greatest triumph. Dr. Blackwell cleared his throat and leaned toward his microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, let's please give Ms. Caraway the respect and recognition she deserves for her outstanding achievement. The applause that followed was polite but awkward, like clapping for someone who had just fallen down the stairs. It wasn't the celebration I had dreamed of. It was pity disguised as support, and somehow that felt worse than Adrian's screaming. I managed to give a shortened version of my acceptance speech, my voice surprisingly steady despite the trembling in my hands. I thanked my professors, my clinical supervisors, and my classmates. I did not mention family. When I stepped down from the stage, the Crystal Award felt heavier than before, weighted not just with achievement, but with the knowledge that my proudest moment had been poisoned by the very people who should have been cheering loudest. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As I made my way back to my seat, I caught glimpses of concerned faces, sympathetic nods, and more than a few phones still recording. By tomorrow, this wouldn't just be a memory shared by the 300 people in this ballroom. It would be a viral video, a cautionary tale, a moment of public humiliation preserved forever on the internet. But as I sat down and looked at the award in my hands, something else was beginning to stir beneath the shame and hurt. Adrian had called me a mistake in front of the most important people in my professional life. He had tried to diminish my achievement at the very moment I was being honored for excellence. What he didn't know was that I had spent 4 years learning to save lives under pressure, to make critical decisions when everything was falling apart, to stand strong when others couldn't. He had just picked a fight with someone who had been trained to handle emergencies. This was about to become his emergency, not mine. The drive home from Westmont Medical Center felt like traveling through a nightmare. I sat in the passenger seat of my Honda Civic, still clutching the Crystal Award, while my best friend and former study partner Naomi Farrow navigated the late evening traffic. She had offered to drive me home when she saw the state I was in after the ceremony, and I was grateful beyond words for her presence. "Celine, you know that what he did was completely unhinged, right?" Naomi said, glancing over at me as we stopped at a red light. "Nobody in that room was thinking about you negatively. They were all thinking about what a psychopath your mom's boyfriend is." I nodded, but I could already feel the familiar spiral of self-doubt beginning. Had I somehow provoked this? Had my success somehow threatened Adrian in a way that made him feel justified in his outburst? These were the questions that always haunted me after our confrontations, the way his anger somehow became my fault in the twisted logic of family dysfunction. My phone had been buzzing continuously since we left the ceremony. I had turned it, face down on my lap, but the vibrations kept coming. Each one a reminder that whatever had happened in that ballroom was now spreading beyond the walls of Westmont Medical Center. "Maybe I should look," I said hesitantly, picking up the phone. "Or maybe you should wait until tomorrow when you've had time to process," Naomi suggested gently. Social media has a way of making everything feel bigger and worse than it actually is. But curiosity and dread were stronger than wisdom. I unlocked my phone and immediately wished I hadn't. 43 missed calls, 72 text messages, hundreds of social media notifications. The numbers kept climbing as I watched, each ping a small knife twist in my stomach. The first text was from my clinical supervisor, Mrs. Draycott. "Celine, I am so sorry about what happened tonight. You handled it with tremendous grace. Please, Don't let one person's inappropriate behavior diminish your incredible achievement. Call me if you need anything. The second was from a classmate. Girl, it's already on TikTok. I'm so sorry. The comments are mostly supportive, but maybe don't. Look right now. My hand started shaking as I opened TikTok. The video was right there on my For You page, posted by someone who had been sitting near the front of the ceremony. The caption read, "Nursing graduate gets her moment ruined by family members screaming she's a mistake at awards ceremony. The secondhand embarrassment is real." The video had been posted less than 2 hours ago and already had 50,000 views. I watched in horror as the scene played out again, seeing myself from the audience's perspective. There was Adrian, rising like an avenging fury, his voice booming across the ballroom. There was me, frozen at the podium, the award trembling in my hands. There was Mom, pulling frantically at his arm, her face a mask of mortification. The comments section was a battlefield. "That poor girl. Imagine working so hard just to have your family humiliate you like this. What kind of toxic family dynamic is this? She's obviously accomplished something amazing. Plot twist. What if he's right, and she really is incompetent? Maybe he was trying to save people's lives. Anyone else think this is fake? Seems too dramatic to be real. Update. Found her Instagram. She's actually legit. Dean's List, clinical awards, the whole thing. That guy is just a psycho." Each comment felt like a judgment, even the supportive ones. My private family drama was now public entertainment, dissected by strangers who would never understand the years of tension that had led to this moment. "Celine, breathe," Naomi said, pulling into my apartment complex. "You're hyperventilating." I realized she was right. My chest felt tight, and I was taking shallow, quick breaths. The award ceremony was supposed to have been the pinnacle of my academic career, but now it would forever be remembered as the night Adrian Vosler called me a mistake in front of everyone who mattered in my professional life. We sat in the parking lot for several minutes while I tried to regain my composure. More texts kept coming in, some from classmates offering support, others from distant relatives who had somehow already heard about the incident, and a few from numbers I didn't recognize. One message made my blood run cold. It was from an unknown number, but the tone was unmistakably familiar. "You embarrassed your mother tonight. Hope you're proud of yourself for dividing the family. Some things are more important than your little award. Adrian." He had gotten my number somehow, and was now trying to make this my fault. The manipulation was so blatant it would have been laughable if it weren't so painful. "Let me see that," Naomi said, reading over my shoulder. "Oh, hell no, we're blocking this number right now, and we're documenting this in case you need it later." "Need it for what?" I asked. "I don't know yet, but something tells me this isn't going to be the end of it." She was right, of course. As we walked up to my apartment, I could already feel the weight of what was coming. This hadn't been just a moment of anger or poor judgment on Adrian's part. This had been calculated humiliation, timed for maximum impact and delivered in front of the people whose opinions mattered most to my career. Inside my small one-bedroom apartment, I set the crystal award on my kitchen counter and stared at it. In the warm light of my kitchen, it was still beautiful, still a testament to 4 years of dedication and hard work. But it was also now forever linked to the worst moment of my professional life. Naomi made tea while I continued scrolling through messages and social media posts. The story was spreading across platforms, each retelling adding its own spin to the narrative. Some framed me as a victim of family abuse. Others speculated about what might have prompted such an extreme outburst. A few suggested that perhaps Adrian knew something about my character that others didn't. The most painful messages were from Mom. 3 texts, sent 20 minutes apart. "Celine, I'm so sorry about tonight. Adrian was drinking more than I realized. He didn't mean what he said. Can we please talk tomorrow? I know you're upset, but family is family. We need to work through this. Please don't let this come between us. You know how much I love you. Adrian loves you too, in his own way. He's just not good at expressing himself. Each message felt like a small betrayal. Not once did she acknowledge how inappropriate Adrian's behavior had been. Not once did she validate my feelings or recognize that I had been publicly humiliated at my moment of greatest achievement. Instead, she was already making excuses, already asking me to be the bigger person, already prioritizing his comfort over my dignity. This was the pattern we had fallen into over the past 3 years. Adrian would do something cruel or inappropriate, I would be hurt or angry, and Mom would rush in to smooth things over by asking me to understand his perspective, to forgive his flaws, to keep the peace for the sake of family harmony. But tonight felt different. Tonight, he hadn't just been cruel in private. He had weaponized my success against me, turning what should have been a celebration into a viral moment of public shame. Your mom texted me too, Naomi said, handing me a steaming mug. She asked me to talk to you, to help you see reason. I told her that the only unreasonable person tonight was her boyfriend. I looked at my friend with gratitude. Naomi had been there through the hardest parts of nursing school, had seen me struggle with Adrian's constant undermining, had witnessed the way his disapproval affected my confidence. She understood that this wasn't just about one bad night. What did she say to that? I asked. She said I didn't understand family dynamics, that Adrian had been under a lot of stress lately, and that you were being too sensitive about his way of showing concern. Concern? I nearly choked on my tea. He called me a mistake in front of 300 healthcare professionals. How is that concern? It's not, Naomi said firmly. And the fact that your mom is framing it that way tells you everything you need to know about where her loyalties lie. As the evening wore on, the social media posts multiplied. Someone had created a hashtag #MistakeGate. Videos were being stitched and duetted, each person adding their own commentary about family toxicity, imposter syndrome, and the pressure faced by women in healthcare. Some of the attention was positive. A prominent nurse influencer had shared the video with the caption, "This is why we need to support each other in healthcare. Nobody should have their achievements diminished like this." Several nursing organizations had reached out offering support and solidarity, but the negative attention was harder to ignore. Cruel memes were already circulating, freeze frames of my shocked face with captions like, "When your family knows you better than your professors do," and "Plot armor breaks when family shows up." The worst part was knowing that this video would follow me forever. Every future employer, every colleague, every patient who Googled my name would potentially see this moment. Adrian had succeeded in ensuring that my greatest professional achievement would forever be linked to public humiliation. By midnight, I was exhausted but unable to sleep. Naomi had reluctantly gone home after I assured her I would be okay, but the apartment felt too quiet, too empty. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Adrian's face twisted with anger, heard his voice booming across the ballroom, felt the collective gasp of 300 people witnessing my family's dysfunction. My phone buzzed one more time. Another unknown number, another message. "You think you're so smart with your little degree. We'll see how smart you really are." This one was different, more threatening, more specific. And it made me realize that Adrian's outburst at the ceremony might not have been an isolated incident of poor judgment. It might have been the opening salvo in a larger campaign to undermine everything I had worked for. As I finally drifted off, to sleep, still wearing my dress from the ceremony, one thought crystallized in my mind. Adrian had declared war on my success tonight. What he didn't know was that 4 years of nursing school had taught me how to fight for things that mattered. Tomorrow, I would start fighting back. The morning sun felt harsh against my bedroom windows as I woke up still wearing yesterday's dress, my makeup smeared, and my crystal award sitting accusingly on the nightstand. My phone showed 47 new notifications, and my head throbbed with the dull ache of a sleepless night spent processing public humiliation. I stumbled to the kitchen and made coffee, trying to piece together a plan for salvaging my reputation and my sanity. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a growing anger that felt cleaner and more focused than the shame I had felt last night. The first call came at 8:30 a.m. Dr. Blackwell's assistant, requesting a meeting at my earliest. Convenience. My stomach dropped, imagining the worst-case scenarios. Had Adrian's outburst somehow called my award into question? Were they reconsidering my position in the intensive care residency program? I arrived at Westmont Medical Center an hour later, having showered and changed into professional attire that I hoped projected confidence I didn't feel. The hospital corridors that had felt like home during my clinical rotations now felt foreign and judgmental. I was convinced that everyone was staring at me, recognizing me as the nurse whose family had caused a scene at the awards ceremony. Dr. Blackwell's office was on the 4th floor, overlooking the hospital's main parking lot. He greeted me with the same warm professionalism he had shown the night before, though I caught concern in his eyes. "Celine, first and foremost, I want to assure you that last night's incident has no bearing on our evaluation of your professional capabilities or your position in our residency program," he said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "Your academic record and clinical performance speak for themselves." The relief was immediate and overwhelming. "Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. I was worried that—" "However," he continued, and my heart sank again, "I am concerned about the potential impact on your well-being and your ability to focus on your residency training. The video of the incident has gained significant attention online, and I want to make sure you have the support you need." He pulled out his phone and showed me a compilation video someone had made, featuring Adrian's outburst alongside commentary from several nursing influencers. The view count had climbed to over 200,000 overnight. "The good news," Dr. Blackwell said, "is that the response from the nursing community has been overwhelmingly supportive. The bad news is that this level of attention can be overwhelming and distracting. I'd like to connect you with our employee assistance program if you're interested." I thanked him and accepted the referral, but as I left his office, my mind was racing with questions that had nothing to do with employee assistance. How had Adrian known exactly when to maximize the impact of his outburst? How had he known that this ceremony would be well attended and likely to be recorded? The answer came to me as I was walking to my car. 2 weeks ago, I had excitedly shared details about the awards ceremony with Mom during one of our weekly phone calls. I had told her about the venue, the expected attendance, the significance of the Outstanding Graduate Award. I had even mentioned that Dr. Blackwell would be presenting the award personally, which was unusual and showed how prestigious the recognition was. At the time, I had been hoping to convey to her how important this achievement was to me, hoping that she might convince Adrian to at least feign interest in my success. Instead, it seemed like I had provided him with a tactical plan for maximum humiliation. This realization led to another, more disturbing thought. I pulled out my phone and opened my text messages, scrolling back through the past few months of conversations with Mom. Pattern after pattern began to emerge. Every time I had shared good news about school or clinical rotations, she had responded, with lukewarm enthusiasm followed by concern about not getting too proud, or reminders that success can change people. Every time I had mentioned a challenge or setback, her responses had been much warmer and more supportive. But it was the timing that really caught my attention. In March, I had told her about receiving the Clinical Excellence Award from my cardiology rotation. 2 days later, I received a formal complaint filed with the nursing school administration, alleging that I had been rude to a patient's family member. The complaint was anonymous and ultimately dismissed as unsubstantiated, but it had caused weeks of stress and investigation. In April, I had mentioned being selected for a special intensive care observership. Within a week, someone had called, the hospital claiming to be concerned about my mental stability and ability to handle the stress of critical care nursing. Again, The complaint was anonymous and ultimately dismissed, but it had required meetings with supervisors and documentation that went into my file. I had attributed both incidents to the competitive nature of nursing school, assuming that a jealous classmate might be trying to undermine my success. But now, looking at the pattern, I was beginning to suspect something much more systematic and personal. I drove home and spent the afternoon doing something I had never thought to do before. Investigating my own life, I pulled out every piece of documentation related to my nursing school experience: acceptance letters, grade reports, clinical evaluations, scholarship information, and correspondence with administrators. What I found made my hands shake with anger. Hidden in a folder of financial aid documents was a letter I had never seen before, dated 6 months ago. It was addressed to the nursing school's financial aid office and signed with my name, requesting that my scholarship disbursements be redirected to a different bank account. The signature looked like mine, but I had never written or sent such a letter. I called the financial aid office immediately. After being transferred through 3 different departments, I finally reached someone who could access my records. "Ms. Caraway, I see here that you requested the change to your scholarship disbursement in January," the administrator said. "The funds have been going to the account you specified." "I never requested any change," I said, my voice tight with controlled fury. "Can you tell me what account the money has been going to?" There was a pause while she looked up the information. "It's an account at Meridian Community Bank, under the name Adrian Vosler." The request included a notarized power of attorney document, giving him authority to manage your financial aid on your behalf. The room spun around me. Adrian had been stealing my scholarship money for months. Thousands of dollars that were meant to support my education and living expenses had been diverted into his account, and he had done it using a forged signature and a fraudulent power of attorney document. But the theft was just the beginning of what I uncovered over the next several hours. Using the hospital's online directory, I found the phone number for the patient advocacy department and called to inquire about any complaints filed against me during my clinical rotations. "We have 2 complaints on file," the advocate told me. "Both were anonymous, and both were ultimately found to be unsubstantiated, but they did trigger our standard investigation protocols. Can you tell me when these complaints were filed?" I asked. The dates corresponded exactly with the times I had shared positive news with Mom. Someone had been monitoring my conversations with her and using the information to time attacks on my professional reputation. My next call was to the nursing school administration. I spoke to the dean of students about the complaint that had been filed in March. "It was quite unusual," she said. "The complaint was very detailed about specific interactions, but when we investigated, we found no evidence to support the allegations. The person who filed it claimed to be the daughter of a patient, but we were never able to verify the identity or even confirm that such a patient existed." "Did the complaint come in over the phone or in writing?" I asked. "It was phoned in, but the caller provided very specific details about your appearance, your schedule, and your clinical assignments. They seemed to have inside knowledge about your rotations that would be difficult for a random patient family member to possess." Inside knowledge. Someone had been feeding Adrian detailed information about my school schedule, my clinical assignments, and my achievements. Someone had been helping him orchestrate a campaign of sabotage that went far beyond the public humiliation at the awards ceremony. There was only one person who had access to all of this information, who knew my schedule well enough to time the complaints for maximum impact, who had been privy to every conversation about my successes and challenges. Mom. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My own mother had been complicit in Adrian's campaign to undermine my nursing career. She had been feeding him information, helping him time his attacks, enabling his financial theft. Her lukewarm responses to my achievements hadn't been emotional distance. They had been intelligence gathering. I spent the rest of the evening collecting evidence. Screenshots of bank statements, printed emails, documented phone calls to various administrators. By midnight, I had assembled a comprehensive picture of financial fraud, identity theft, and professional sabotage that spanned nearly a year. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. While organizing my documents, I found a voicemail I had saved from 3 months ago. Mom had called to check on me after a particularly difficult clinical rotation, and I had been touched by what seemed like genuine concern for my well-being. Listening to it again with new ears, I heard something I had missed before. In the background, Adrian's voice was clearly audible, asking specific questions. Find out which attending physician she's working with. Ask about her schedule next week. See if she mentions any patients by name. The voicemail had captured him, coaching her on what information to gather, proving that the sabotage was coordinated and deliberate. They weren't just unsupportive family members. They were co-conspirators in a systematic effort to destroy my career before it began. As I sat surrounded by evidence of their betrayal, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and confusion of the past year crystallized into cold, clear anger. Adrian hadn't just humiliated me at the award ceremony. He had been waging a covert war against my success for months, using my own mother as his intelligence source. But he had made one critical mistake. He had underestimated the very skills that nursing school had taught me: attention to detail, systematic investigation, and the ability to remain calm under pressure while gathering facts. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of turning those skills against him. Adrian Vosler had declared me a mistake in front of 300 people. Now I was going to show him what a mistake really looked like. Armed with a folder full of evidence and a head full of righteous anger, I decided it was time for some direct confrontation. The discovery that Mom and Adrian had been systematically sabotaging my career for months had transformed my hurt into something harder and more focused. I wasn't the same person who had frozen at the podium 3 days ago. My first stop was Mom's house in Brookfield Heights, a modest 2-story home that she had shared with Adrian for the past 2 years. I had called ahead, my voice carefully neutral, saying I wanted to talk about what happened at the ceremony. What I didn't mention was the folder of bank statements and forged documents sitting in my passenger seat. Mom answered the door looking haggard, her usual put-together appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and tired eyes. "Celine, honey, I'm so glad you called. Come in, come in. Adrian's at work, so we can talk privately." The house smelled like coffee and cleaning supplies, the familiar scent of a home trying too hard to appear normal. We sat at the kitchen table, where I had done homework as a teenager, where we had shared countless meals and conversations back when our relationship wasn't poisoned by Adrian's presence. "Mom, I need you to explain something to me," I said, pulling out the first document from my folder. "This is a letter requesting that my scholarship funds be redirected to Adrian's bank account. It has my signature on it, but I never wrote or signed this letter." Her face went pale, and she reached for her coffee mug with shaking hands. "Celine, I don't know anything about financial matters. Adrian handles all of that kind of thing." "Adrian handles my financial aid? Since when does your boyfriend have any authority over my education funding?" "He was just trying to help," she said, her voice getting smaller. "You were so stressed about money, and he offered to manage things to take the pressure off you." I stared at her in disbelief. "Mom, this is fraud, identity theft. He stole thousands of dollars from my scholarship account using a forged signature." "Don't be so dramatic," she snapped, her tone shifting from apologetic to defensive. "It's not stolen if it went to support the family. You think your education exists in a vacuum? We all make sacrifices." "What sacrifices did you make? What sacrifices did Adrian make? This money was specifically allocated for my tuition, my books, my clinical supplies. What family expenses could possibly justify stealing educational funding?" She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "You don't understand how hard it's been. Adrian lost his job last year, and we've been struggling. We were going to pay it back once things got better." "He lost his job? When? You never mentioned that to me." Because we didn't want to burden you with our problems. You were so focused on your precious nursing school, so wrapped up in your achievements. We didn't want to distract you with real-world concerns. The manipulation in her words was breathtaking. Somehow, my dedication to my education had become a character flaw, and their theft had become a sacrifice they made to protect me from reality. Mom, even if Adrian was unemployed, that doesn't give him the right to forge my signature and steal my scholarship money. And it doesn't explain the anonymous complaints filed against me or the phone calls questioning my mental stability. Her face went completely white. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone and played the voicemail where Adrian's voice could be heard coaching her on what information to gather about my clinical rotations. The sound of his voice saying, "Find out which attending physician she's working with," filled the kitchen. Mom sank back into her chair, her hands covering her face. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Adrian gets so angry when things don't go well for him. When you started succeeding, it made him feel worse about his own situation. I was just trying to keep the peace. By sabotaging my career? By helping him file false complaints against me? By feeding him information he could use to undermine my professional reputation? I never meant for it to go that far, she whispered. I thought if you faced a few setbacks, you might be more understanding of our struggles, more willing to help financially. The cold calculation behind her words was stunning. She had actively participated in undermining my success because she wanted me to fail enough to become financially dependent on them, making it easier for them to access my resources. So, the awards ceremony, I said slowly, was that planned, too? She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. Adrian had been drinking. He gets emotional when he drinks. When he saw you up there, accepting that award, looking so proud and successful while we've been struggling, he just snapped. He just snapped? Mom, he called me a mistake in front of 300 healthcare professionals. He tried to destroy my reputation at the most important moment of my career. That wasn't an emotional reaction. That was a calculated attack. You're being too sensitive, she said, her tone shifting again to irritation. Families should be able to speak honestly to each other. Adrian was just expressing his concerns about your pride, about how success was changing you. I stood up, gathering my documents. The conversation was following the same pattern it always did. Adrian's behavior would be minimized, my feelings would be dismissed, and I would be asked to be the bigger person for the sake of family harmony. I'm done with this, I said. I'm done pretending that what you and Adrian have done is acceptable. I'm done being understanding about your struggles while you actively work to create struggles for me. Where are you going? She called as I headed for the door. To file a police report for identity theft and fraud. To report the forged power of attorney to the bank. To document every anonymous complaint and false accusation you helped him file. Celine, wait! You can't involve the police. This is family business. We can work this out ourselves. I turned back to her, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt completely calm and clear about our relationship. Mom, you chose him over me the first time he disrespected me. You've been choosing him over me every day since then. You chose him over me when you helped him steal my scholarship money. And you chose him over me when you sat silently while he called me a mistake in front of everyone I respect professionally. That's not fair, she protested. I love you both. I was trying to hold the family together. There is no family, I said quietly. There's you, there's Adrian, and there's me. And you've made it very clear which side you're on. I left her crying at the kitchen table and drove directly to the Brookfield Heights Police Department. Filing the report felt surreal, providing evidence that my own mother and her boyfriend had been conducting a months-long campaign of financial fraud and professional sabotage against me. The detective who took my statement was a middle-aged woman named Sergeant Rodriguez who listened with professional sympathy as I laid out the evidence. Bank records showing unauthorized transfers, forged documents with my signature, recorded evidence of coordination between Mom and Adrian. "This is a clear case of identity theft and financial fraud," she said, reviewing the documents. "The power of attorney document is obviously forged. The notary stamp doesn't match any registered notaries in the state. We'll need to interview both suspects and execute a search warrant for their financial records." As I was leaving the police station, my phone rang. Mom, calling from an unknown number. "Selene, what have you done? Adrian is furious. He says you're trying to destroy our lives over money." "I'm not trying to destroy anything," I said. "I'm trying to stop the destruction you've already been causing to my life." "You don't understand. If Adrian gets arrested, we'll lose the house. I'll have nowhere to go." "Is your pride really worth destroying your own mother's security?" The emotional manipulation was predictable but still painful. Somehow their criminal behavior had become my fault, and their consequences had become my responsibility. "Mom, you had choices. You could have chosen not to help Adrian forge my signature. You could have chosen not to feed him information to use against me. You could have chosen to defend me when he called me a mistake in front of everyone I work with. You made your choices, and now you get to live with the consequences. This isn't over." Adrian's voice came through the phone, apparently having taken it from Mom. "You think you're so smart with your little degree, but you have no idea what you're messing with. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." "Feel free to try," I said. "But next time you want to make public accusations against me, you might want to make sure you're not facing federal charges for identity theft." I hung up and blocked the number. That evening, I received a call from Naomi, who had been monitoring social media for any new developments in what was now being called #MistakeGate. "Selene, you need to see this," she said. "Adrian's been posting on Facebook, claiming that you falsely accused him of financial crimes to get revenge for his honest assessment of your character. He's saying you're mentally unstable and vindictive." I looked at his posts on Naomi's phone. Long, rambling screeds about ungrateful young people who couldn't handle criticism. Claims that I had stolen money from the family and was now trying to cover it up by filing false police reports. Suggestions that my nursing license should be revoked because I was clearly emotionally unstable. Each post had dozens of likes and supportive comments from his friends and coworkers, people who didn't know me but were ready to believe his version of events. The counter-narrative was spreading as fast as the original video. But Adrian had made a crucial mistake. In his anger, he had included specific details about the scholarship theft, information that only someone with direct knowledge of the fraud would know. He was essentially confessing to the crimes while trying to justify them. "Screenshot everything," I told Naomi. "His own posts are going to be evidence in the criminal case." That night, I sat in my apartment looking at the Crystal Award that had started this whole nightmare. In the space of 4 days, I had gone from the proudest moment of my life to filing police reports against my own family. But I didn't feel defeated. Adrian had called me a mistake, had tried to convince me that I didn't belong in healthcare, that I wasn't capable of the success I had achieved. But every piece of evidence I had uncovered proved the opposite. They had to work so hard to undermine me because my success was real and undeniable. Tomorrow, I would start my residency in the intensive care unit at Westmont Medical Center. I would begin the career that Adrian had tried to prevent, and Mom had helped him sabotage. And I would do it knowing that I had fought back against people who wanted to see me fail. The award ceremony had been meant to celebrate my achievement. Instead, it had become the catalyst for uncovering the truth about my family and finding the strength to stand up for myself. Adrian was right about one thing. This wasn't over, but he had fundamentally misunderstood who was going to win. The bomb. Week following my police report felt like living in the eye of a hurricane. Everything around me was chaos: social media speculation, family drama, and legal proceedings. But I had found a strange center of calm in the knowledge that I was finally fighting back. My first priority was protecting my professional reputation while the legal case developed. I scheduled a meeting with Dr. Blackwell and the hospital's chief nursing officer, Camille Dravain, to proactively address any concerns about the ongoing situation. "Celine, we want you to know that the hospital administration fully supports you," Ms. Dravain said as we sat in the hospital's executive conference room. "We've reviewed all the evidence you've provided, and it's clear that you've been the victim of a systematic campaign of harassment and fraud." Dr. Blackwell nodded. "What concerns us is ensuring that this situation doesn't interfere with your, ability to focus on your residency training. The intensive care unit is demanding enough without the distraction of legal proceedings." "I understand," I said. "I'm committed to maintaining the highest professional standards regardless of my personal circumstances. But I also want to be transparent about what's happening in case it affects the hospital in any way." "Actually, we think the opposite might be true," Ms. Dravain said. "Your handling of this situation has demonstrated exactly the kind of composure and problem-solving ability we value in our nursing staff. You identified a complex problem, gathered evidence systematically, and took appropriate action through proper channels. Those are precisely the skills we want to see in critical care nursing." The validation was more meaningful than any award. These were people who understood healthcare, who knew what it took to succeed in high-pressure medical environments, and they were telling me that my response to Adrian's attacks had actually demonstrated my professional competence. My next step was connecting with legal representation. The police detective had recommended a law firm that specialized in identity theft and financial fraud cases. The attorney, Lucan Faraway, was a sharp-eyed man in his 40s who listened to my story with the kind of focused attention that made me feel like my case mattered. "This is one of the most comprehensive fraud schemes I've seen involving family members," he said, reviewing my documentation. "The forged power of attorney, the redirected scholarship funds, the coordinated campaign of false complaints. They've essentially created a criminal conspiracy designed to undermine your career and steal your educational resources." "What kind of penalties could they face?" I asked. "Identity theft is a federal crime. Financial fraud involving educational funds could result in both state and federal charges. If convicted, they could face significant prison time and be required to pay restitution plus penalties. Your mother's cooperation might result in reduced charges for her, but the evidence of active participation is quite strong." Mr. Faraway also suggested pursuing civil litigation to recover damages beyond just the stolen scholarship money. "They've potentially cost you professional opportunities, caused emotional distress, and damaged your reputation. A civil suit could result in compensation for those losses as well." The legal strategy was taking shape, but I knew that the court of public opinion was equally important. The story had continued to spread on social media, with new developments being shared and analyzed daily. Adrian's Facebook posts claiming that I was mentally unstable and vindictive were being screenshot and shared, but so were the bank records and forged documents that proved his guilt. Naomi had become my unofficial social media manager, monitoring posts and comments across platforms. "The narrative is shifting in your favor," she told me during one of our evening strategy sessions. "At first, people were just sympathetic about the awards ceremony incident. But now that the financial fraud has come to light, people are starting to see it as part of a bigger pattern of abuse." Several nursing influencers had reached out offering support. One popular TikTok creator who specialized in healthcare worker advocacy had made a video breaking down the evidence of fraud, explaining why Adrian's theft of my scholarship funds was particularly harmful to healthcare education. "This isn't just personal drama," she said in the video. "This is about someone systematically trying to prevent a qualified person from entering healthcare. At a time when we desperately need more nurses, someone was actively sabotaging a top graduate's career." The video had been viewed over 1 million times and had sparked broader conversations about financial abuse within families and the challenges faced by first-generation college students. But the most meaningful support came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Elena Draycott, My former clinical supervisor called to tell me that several of my nursing school classmates had reached out to her with their own stories of suspicious incidents during our program. "It seems that you weren't the only one targeted," she said. "Two other students received anonymous complaints during their clinical rotations. Both filed around the same time you were sharing positive updates with your mother. We're starting to suspect that Adrian may have been targeting any student he saw as competition for scholarship funds or recognition." This revelation opened up new possibilities. If Adrian and Mom had been targeting multiple students, it showed a broader pattern of criminal behavior that went beyond personal family dysfunction. It suggested they had been running a systematic scheme to undermine successful nursing students, possibly to increase the chances of scholarship money being redirected or awards being given to less qualified candidates. Mr. Faraway was particularly interested in this development. If we can prove that they targeted multiple students, it elevates this from personal family drama to education fraud on a much larger scale. That could result in federal charges and much more serious penalties. The investigation expanded to include interviews with other nursing students and a review of all anonymous complaints filed during the past 2 years. The pattern that emerged was damning. Students who had been performing well academically and who had been mentioned in social media posts or family conversations had all received anonymous complaints timed to coincide with important milestones or opportunities. Adrian and Mom hadn't just been targeting me. They had been conducting a campaign against successful nursing students in general, possibly motivated by both personal animosity and financial opportunity. As the evidence mounted, I found myself in a strange position. What had started as a deeply personal betrayal by my own family had become a case study in educational fraud that could potentially protect other students from similar attacks. The district attorney's office reached out to schedule a meeting to discuss my testimony in what was now being treated as a major fraud case. The lead prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Kyla Verrill, explained that they were considering charges that could result in federal prison time. "Your case has uncovered what appears to be a systematic scheme to defraud educational institutions and undermine student success," she said. "The evidence you've gathered is comprehensive and compelling. We believe we can secure convictions on multiple federal charges." The realization that my personal nightmare had potentially protected other students from similar attacks was both empowering and overwhelming. I had gone from being a victim of family betrayal to being a key witness in a case that could prevent future educational fraud. But the most important ally I gained during this period was someone I hadn't expected: myself. 4 years of nursing school had taught me to remain calm under pressure, to gather information systematically, and to advocate for people who couldn't advocate for themselves. For the first time, I was using those skills to advocate for my own future. The awards ceremony felt like a lifetime ago, but the Crystal Award still sat on my kitchen counter, catching the light from my window each morning. It no longer represented just my academic achievement. It had become a symbol of my refusal to let other people define my worth or derail my success. Adrian had called me a mistake in front of everyone who mattered in my professional life. But the investigation that followed had revealed the truth. The only mistake was trusting people who saw my success as a threat rather than a celebration. Tomorrow, I would begin my testimony in the case that could send my own family to federal prison. It wasn't the future I had imagined when I walked across that stage to accept my award, but it was the future I had chosen when I decided to fight back. The girl who had frozen at the podium was gone. In her place was someone who understood that sometimes the most important nursing you can do is taking care of yourself. The call came on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after I had filed my police report, and 2 days before Adrian and Vera Siltrin were scheduled to appear in court for their arraignment. I was reviewing medication protocols for my ICU residency when my phone rang, displaying a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Caraway?" "This is Magnus Trelane from Channel 7 Action News. We've been following your case, and we'd like to invite you to appear on our morning show to discuss educational fraud targeting healthcare workers. We think your story could help other students who might be facing similar situations. I nearly dropped the phone. Channel 7 was the most watched morning show in the state, reaching over 500,000 viewers daily. The thought of sharing my story on such a large platform was both terrifying and exhilarating. Our legal affairs correspondent has been investigating educational fraud schemes, and your case has become a focal point for broader issues in healthcare education funding. We'd like to give you the opportunity to tell your story in your own words, rather than letting others control the narrative. That phrase resonated deeply. For months, Adrian and Vera had controlled the narrative about my character and capabilities. For weeks, social media had controlled the narrative about my family drama. This would be my chance to speak for myself, to present the facts without filters or interpretation. I'll need to clear it with my attorney, I said. Of course, we'd like to schedule this for Monday morning if possible. The timing would coincide with your case going to trial, and we think the public education aspect could be quite impactful. After speaking with Mr. Faraway, who enthusiastically endorsed the appearance as a way to highlight the broader legal issues at stake, I agreed to the interview. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly word would spread about my upcoming television appearance. The weekend before the interview, Naomi came over to help me prepare. We practiced potential questions, reviewed the key facts of my case, and discussed how to stay focused on the educational fraud issue rather than getting drawn into personal family drama. Remember, she said, this isn't about revenge or making Adrian and Vera look bad. This is about protecting other students and highlighting a systemic problem in educational funding security. Sunday evening, as I was finalizing my notes and choosing what to wear, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you're going to embarrass us on TV? We'll see about that. The truth will come out tomorrow. I screenshot the message and forwarded it to both Mr. Faraway and the police detective handling my case. Even facing criminal charges, Adrian was still trying to intimidate me into silence. Monday morning arrived with unseasonably bright sunshine and my stomach tied in knots. The Channel 7 studios were located in downtown Millbrook, a sleek glass building that housed the city's premier news operation. I arrived early, wanting time to compose myself before going on air. Magnus Trelane turned out to be a veteran journalist in his 50s, with kind eyes and a reputation for thorough preparation. During our pre-interview conversation, he demonstrated an impressive grasp of the legal complexities in my case. We've done our research on educational fraud schemes, he said. Your case represents something we're seeing more frequently. Family members exploiting students' financial aid to cover their own expenses. What makes your situation particularly egregious is the systematic campaign to undermine your professional reputation as well. The studio itself was smaller than I had expected, with bright lights and 2 comfortable chairs positioned at an angle that encouraged conversation. As the crew made final preparations, I felt that familiar flutter of nerves mixed with determination. We're live in 30 seconds, the floor director announced. Magnus looked directly into camera 1 as the red light came on. Good morning, and welcome to Channel 7 Action News. I'm Magnus Trelane. This morning we're discussing a disturbing trend in educational fraud, where family members exploit student financial aid for their own benefit. With me is Selene Caraway, a recent nursing graduate whose case has exposed a systematic scheme targeting multiple healthcare students. He turned to me, his expression both professional and compassionate. Selene, thank you for joining us. Can you start by telling us about the night this all began? I took a deep breath and launched into the story of the awards ceremony, Adrian's outburst, and the humiliation I felt in that moment. But as I spoke, I realized something had changed. The shame that had dominated my emotions for weeks was gone, replaced by a clear sense of purpose. At the time, I thought the worst thing that could happen was being publicly embarrassed, I said. I didn't realize that the humiliation was just a distraction from months of systematic financial fraud and professional sabotage. Magnus leaned forward. You've alleged that your mother and her boyfriend stole thousands of dollars from your scholarship account and filed false complaints against you with your nursing program. Can you walk us through how you discovered this? I explained the process of investigation, the forged power of attorney documents, the redirected scholarship funds, and the pattern of anonymous complaints timed to coincide with my academic achievements. As I spoke, graphics appeared on screen showing the forged signatures, the bank transfer records, and a timeline of the fraudulent activities. What's particularly disturbing, Magnus noted, is that this scheme apparently targeted multiple nursing students, not just you personally. That's correct, I said. The investigation revealed that at least 3 other students received similar anonymous complaints during the same time period. It appears that Adrian and Vera were running a systematic campaign against successful nursing students, possibly to redirect scholarship opportunities, or simply to undermine people they saw as threats. The interview was going well, with Magnus asking thoughtful questions that allowed me to present the facts clearly and professionally. I was beginning to relax when the studio door burst open. Adrian Vosler stormed in, his face flushed with anger, and his voice booming across the live television studio. "This is all lies," he shouted, pointing directly at me. "She's a manipulative fraud who's trying to destroy innocent people to cover up her own failures." The studio erupted in controlled chaos. Security guards materialized from nowhere, moving quickly to intercept Adrian while the cameras kept rolling. Magnus remained completely composed, his years of live television experience serving him well. "Sir, this is a live television broadcast," Magnus said calmly. "You'll need to leave immediately, or we'll have to call the police." "I'm not leaving until people hear the truth," Adrian bellowed, struggling against the security guards. "She stole money from her family, and now she's trying to frame us for it. She's mentally unstable and vindictive." In that moment, everything crystallized. Here was Adrian, facing criminal charges for fraud and identity theft, choosing to commit another crime by trespassing on a live television broadcast to continue his campaign of intimidation against me. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. There I sat, presenting documented evidence and speaking calmly about systematic fraud, while he ranted and physically disrupted a news program. "Mr. Vosler," Magnus said, his journalist instincts taking over, "you're currently facing federal charges for identity theft and educational fraud. Are you denying that you forged Ms. Caraway's signature to redirect her scholarship funds to your personal bank account?" The question caught Adrian off guard. His face went through a series of expressions: anger, confusion, then a flush of guilty recognition that he had just been caught in a live television confession. "I didn't steal anything," he said, but his voice had lost its booming confidence. That money was being wasted on her ungrateful attitude. She needed to learn some responsibility about family obligations. The studio fell silent, except for the hum of cameras. Adrian had just admitted on live television to redirecting my scholarship funds, claiming it was justified because of my ungrateful attitude. He had provided his own confession to the crime he was charged with. Magnus turned back to me, his eyebrows slightly raised in professional amazement. "Ms. Caraway, how do you respond to the allegation that your scholarship money was being wasted?" I looked directly into the camera, feeling a calm certainty settle over me. My scholarship money was allocated specifically for educational expenses, tuition, books, clinical supplies, and living expenses that would allow me to focus on my studies. I graduated summa cum laude, received the Outstanding Graduate Award, and have been accepted into the intensive care residency program at Westmont Medical Center. I'm not sure how academic excellence constitutes a waste of educational funding. The security guards had successfully escorted Adrian from the studio, but his damage was done. In less than 5 minutes of live television, he had provided a public confession to the crimes he was charged with while simultaneously demonstrating the exact behavior patterns that had led to those charges in the first place. Magnus shook his head with professional amazement. In 25 years of journalism, I've rarely seen someone provide such clear evidence against themselves on live television. Ms. Caraway, what do you hope viewers take away from your experience? I want other students to know that educational fraud is a real problem, and that they have rights and resources if they become victims, I said. I also want them to know that success earned through hard work and dedication is never a mistake, regardless of what anyone else might say. As the interview concluded and the cameras stopped rolling, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the night of the awards ceremony. Genuine pride. Not just in my academic achievements, but in my strength, my resilience, and my refusal to be silenced by people who wanted to see me fail. Adrian had called me a mistake in front of 300 people at the awards ceremony. Today, he had incriminated himself in front of 500,000 television viewers while I sat composed and dignified, presenting facts rather than screaming accusations. The girl who had frozen at the podium was truly gone. In her place was someone who understood that the greatest vindication isn't revenge. It's success achieved despite every attempt to prevent it. The Millbrook County Courthouse stood like a monument to justice, its limestone columns and marble steps representing everything I had hoped for when I first filed my police report 6 weeks ago. Today was the day Adrian Vosler and Vera Siltrin would face formal sentencing for their crimes, and I was scheduled to give a victim impact statement before the judge handed down their punishment. The media attention following Adrian's live television confession had transformed my case from a local family drama into a statewide discussion about educational fraud and family financial abuse. The video of him admitting on camera that he had redirected my scholarship funds because of my ungrateful attitude had been viewed over 2 million times across social platforms. Mr. Faraway met me on the courthouse steps, carrying a briefcase, filled with 6 weeks' worth of additional evidence that had emerged since Adrian's television appearance. The prosecution is confident about today, he said as we climbed the steps. Adrian's confession on live TV essentially eliminated any possibility of a not guilty plea, and the additional victims who came forward have strengthened the federal charges considerably. Indeed, Adrian's public breakdown had opened floodgates. 3 more nursing students had contacted authorities with evidence of similar schemes: forged documents redirecting their financial aid, anonymous complaints filed during their clinical rotations, and systematic campaigns to undermine their academic standing. The case had evolved from personal family fraud to a broader pattern of educational crime. The courtroom was packed when we entered. I recognized several faces from the nursing community, including Mrs. Elena Draycott and Dr. Blackwell, who had come to show support. Local news crews filled the media section, and I spotted Magnus Trelane from Channel 7 in the front row, probably preparing a follow-up story about the resolution. Adrian sat at the defendant's table, wearing an ill-fitting suit, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. His face had lost the arrogant confidence I had grown accustomed to over 3 years. Instead, he looked diminished, older, and genuinely afraid of what was about to happen. Vera sat separately with her own attorney, having accepted a plea agreement, in exchange for testifying against Adrian and cooperating fully with the investigation. The woman who had raised me, who had once bandaged my scraped knees and helped with homework, looked like a stranger now. We hadn't spoken since the day I filed the police report, and I could feel the permanent fracture in our relationship settling into place. Judge Orion Drevin called the court to order, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades presiding over criminal cases. He was known for thorough preparation and fair but firm sentencing, exactly the kind of judge I had hoped would handle my case. We are here today for the sentencing of Adrian Michael Vosler and Vera Marie Siltrin, who have pleaded guilty to multiple counts of identity theft, educational fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes, Judge Drevin announced. Before I pronounce sentence, I will hear from the primary victim, Ms. Celine Caraway. I walked to the podium on steady legs, carrying the statement I had prepared over the past week. The courtroom was silent, except for the scratch of court reporters' pens and the quiet hum of recording equipment. Your Honor, I began, my voice clear and strong. 6 weeks ago, I thought the worst thing that could happen was being publicly humiliated at my nursing school graduation ceremony. I was wrong. The worst thing was discovering that people I trusted had been systematically sabotaging my education and stealing resources meant to help me succeed. I explained how the fraud had affected not just my finances, but my mental health, my professional relationships, and my ability to trust the people closest to me. I described the months of self-doubt when I couldn't understand why anonymous complaints kept appearing in my file, why my scholarship disbursements were delayed, why opportunities seemed to slip away despite my strong academic performance. The defendants didn't just steal money, I said. They stole my sense of security, my faith in family relationships, and nearly stole my career before it began. But they also revealed something important. My success was real enough that they had to work very hard to undermine it. I looked directly at Adrian as I continued. The defendant called me a mistake in front of 300 healthcare professionals. Today, I want this court to know that the only mistake was trusting people who saw my achievements as threats rather than reasons for celebration. When I finished, Judge Drevin nodded gravely and called for the prosecution's sentencing recommendation. Assistant District Attorney Kyla Varel stood and outlined the scope of the crimes. Over $15,000 in stolen scholarship funds, forged federal documents, identity theft across multiple victims, and conspiracy to commit educational fraud. Your Honor, this case represents a systematic attack on educational opportunity itself, she said. The defendants targeted successful students specifically because of their achievements, attempting to redirect resources and opportunities away from those who had earned them. This kind of fraud undermines the integrity of educational funding programs and harms not just individual victims, but the healthcare system that depends on qualified professionals. Adrian's attorney made a brief plea for leniency, citing his client's financial stress and claiming the crimes were motivated by family preservation rather than greed. But Judge Drevin seemed unimpressed, particularly when the defense attorney tried to minimize Adrian's live television confession as emotional distress. Mr. Vosler, Judge Drevin said, looking directly at Adrian, your crimes were calculated, systematic, and targeted multiple victims over an extended period. Your appearance on television, where you admitted to these crimes while attempting to justify them, demonstrates a complete lack of remorse or understanding of your wrongdoing. The sentencing was swift and comprehensive. Adrian received 4 years in federal prison plus 5 years of supervised probation and was ordered to pay full restitution plus penalties totaling over $40,000. He was also permanently banned from accessing any educational financial aid programs or serving in any fiduciary capacity. Vera's cooperation had earned her a reduced sentence, 18 months in minimum security prison, 3 years probation, and restitution payments. But Judge Drevin made clear that her role as my mother made her betrayal particularly egregious. Ms. Siltron, you had a duty to protect and support your daughter's educational goals, he said. Instead, you actively participated in undermining her success and stealing resources meant to help her achieve her dreams. The court finds this breach of maternal responsibility to be an aggravating factor in your crimes. As the bailiffs led Adrian away in handcuffs, he turned back toward me with one final attempt at intimidation. This isn't over, he called out before the guards silenced him. But it was over, completely and officially over. The man who had called me a mistake was now a convicted felon facing 4 years in federal prison. The woman who had chosen him over me was following close behind. And I was walking out of that courthouse as a vindicated victim who had fought back and won. Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters gathered for statements. I kept my remarks brief and professional, focusing on the broader issue of educational fraud rather than personal satisfaction. This case shows that students have rights and resources when they become victims of financial abuse, I said. I hope other students who might be facing similar situations will know that they don't have to suffer in silence. Mr. Faraway shook my hand as the cameras stopped rolling. "Justice served," he said simply. As I walked away from the courthouse, I realized that the Crystal Award sitting on my kitchen counter had been transformed once again. It was no longer just a symbol of my academic achievement, or even of my refusal to be defeated by family betrayal. It had become proof that truth, persistence, and courage ultimately triumph over lies, manipulation, and abuse. Adrian had been wrong about everything. I wasn't a mistake. I belonged exactly where I had fought to be. And now the legal system had officially confirmed what I had known all along. My success was earned, my worth was real, and no one had the right to steal either one from me. 2 years later, I stood in the conference room at Westmont Medical Center, looking out at 25 nursing students who had gathered for the first meeting of the Educational Fraud Prevention Workshop. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating faces that reminded me of my own 2 years ago. Eager, hopeful, but also vulnerable to the kind of exploitation I had experienced. How many of you have family members who have access to your financial aid information? I asked the group. Nearly every hand went up, just as I had expected. The workshop had started as a small initiative, something I developed during my second year of ICU residency, after receiving dozens of messages from nursing students who had seen my story and suspected they might be experiencing similar abuse. What began as informal conversations had evolved into a comprehensive program that Westmont Medical Center now offered to all healthcare education programs in the state. The reality, I continued, addressing the students, is that educational fraud by family members is more common than anyone wants to admit. The people who should be your biggest supporters sometimes become your biggest obstacles, especially when your success highlights their own struggles or failures. I shared the basics of my story, not for dramatic effect, but as a cautionary tale and proof that it was possible to fight back and win. The room was silent as I described the systematic theft, the forged documents, the anonymous complaints, designed to derail my career. The hardest part wasn't the financial loss, I said. It was realizing that people I loved were actively working against my dreams. But here's what I learned. Their actions revealed the strength of my success, not its weakness. They had to work so hard to undermine me because what I had achieved was real and undeniable. After the workshop, I returned to my office. Yes, my office. 6 months ago, I had been promoted to Assistant Director of Critical Care Education, making me the youngest person ever to hold that position at Westmont Medical Center. The Crystal Award from my nursing school graduation ceremony sat on my desk next to certificates from the State Nursing Board, letters of commendation from patients' families, and a photo from the day I received my master's degree in healthcare administration. That Crystal Award had become something different over the past 2 years. It was no longer just a symbol of academic achievement or even personal resilience. It represented the moment when I learned to trust my own worth, despite what others tried to tell me about myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Naomi, who was now working as a pediatric nurse at the regional medical center across town. "Saw your interview on Channel 7 this morning. You looked amazing. Dinner tomorrow to celebrate the workshop launch?" The interview had been a follow-up to my original appearance, focusing on the Educational Fraud Prevention Program and its impact on students across the state. Magnus Trelane had conducted it again, and this time there were no unexpected interruptions or dramatic confrontations. Just a thoughtful discussion about systematic change and student empowerment. The program had helped over 200 students identify and report financial abuse, resulting in criminal charges against 15 family members and the recovery of more than $500,000 in stolen educational funds. But the statistics, while important, didn't capture the real impact. Young people learning to trust their instincts, set boundaries, and fight for their futures. Dr. Blackwell knocked on my office door, interrupting my reflection. "Selene, I just got off the phone with the State Education Commission. They want to implement your fraud prevention workshop in every healthcare program in the state. The funding has been approved." The expansion meant that thousands of students would have access to resources and education that could protect them from the kind of systematic abuse I had experienced. It was validation that my painful experience had been transformed into something that could prevent others from suffering the same betrayal. "There's something else," Dr. Blackwell continued. "The Commission wants to establish an annual scholarship in your name for students who have overcome family financial abuse to pursue healthcare careers. They're calling it the Selene Caraway Resilience Scholarship." I sat down heavily in my chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was telling me. A scholarship in my name. Resources for students facing the same challenges that had nearly derailed my own education. My story becoming a catalyst for systematic change rather than just personal vindication. "I don't know what to say," I managed. "Say yes," he smiled. "You've earned this recognition, and more importantly, you've created something that will outlast all of us. All of us." That evening, I drove to the small apartment I had moved into after the trial. A space that was entirely my own, decorated with things I loved, filled with books I wanted to read and plants I chose to care for. It was modest, but peaceful, a sanctuary I had created without anyone else's approval or interference. I opened my laptop and began typing a letter that would be included in the materials for the new scholarship program. To future Selene Caraway. Resilience Scholarship recipients. If you are reading this, it means you have faced significant obstacles in your educational journey, possibly including betrayal by people who should have supported your dreams. I want you to know that your worth is not determined by others' ability to recognize it, and your success is not diminished by others' attempts to undermine it. The scholarship you are receiving exists because sometimes the most painful experiences can be transformed into the most meaningful contributions. Your resilience in the face of adversity has already proven that you have the strength to succeed in healthcare, where resilience is not just a personal virtue, but a professional necessity. Remember, that family is not always defined by blood or legal relationships. Family is found among the people who celebrate your achievements, support your goals, and stand beside you when times are difficult. The healthcare community you are joining will become your chosen family, united by shared purpose and commitment to healing. Your success is not a mistake. Your dreams are not too ambitious. Your worth is not up for debate. Trust yourself, fight for your future, and never let anyone convince you that you don't deserve the opportunities you have earned. As I finished writing, I thought about Adrian and Vera. Adrian was serving his sentence in federal prison, scheduled for release in 2 more years. Vera had been released after serving her full 18-month sentence and was living in a different state, working in a grocery store and trying to rebuild her life. We had not spoken since the day I testified at her sentencing. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, but I felt no regret either. They had made choices that led to consequences, just as I had made choices that led to success. The difference was that my choices were guided by integrity, perseverance, and faith in my own potential. The last thing I did before bed was move the Crystal Award from my office desk to my bedroom nightstand, where I could see it first thing every morning. Not as a reminder of past trauma, but as a promise to myself. I would never again allow anyone else to define my worth or limit my potential. 2 years ago, a man had called me a mistake in front of everyone who mattered in my professional life. Tonight, my name would be on a scholarship program that would help dozens of students each year overcome similar betrayals and achieve their dreams in healthcare. He had been wrong about everything. I wasn't a mistake. I was a force for change, a symbol of resilience, and proof that sometimes the greatest victories come from the deepest wounds. My worth had never been in question. I had just needed to learn to see it for myself. Up next, you've Got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.